Uncharted the movie was shit. Shocking. Let's talk about why. Normally at this point in the video, I'll do a synopsis of the movie, but this is Uncharted. If you're watching the movie, you've more than likely played the video games, know the characters, know the side characters, know Nate, know Sully, know the whole thing. They're looking for treasure. They look for treasure, stuff goes wrong, other people look for the treasure as well and try to stop them. The Uncharted series of video games is one of my favorite series of video games. In particular, Uncharted 2, absolutely love it. And I was actually excited for this movie. But it was a video game movie, so I knew straight away to taper my expectations, not to expect too much, because video game movies, let's be honest, they're very rarely, if ever, any good. And I told Hollywood in a series called Dear Hollywood, funny little series I made about a year ago, right up here, the video's right up here somewhere, not to make video game movies anymore for the reasons in that video. And we'll talk about some of those reasons later on because they certainly apply to this movie. I recently did a trailer reaction and I got pretty excited for the movie based on the trailer because some of the visuals in the trailer are phenomenal. But that's just the thing with this movie. All of the best bits are in the trailer. All the visually best bits are in the trailer. All the big action scenes are in the trailers. So there's not a whole lot left within the actual movie. If you've seen the trailer, you pretty much know the story. Now, I went to see this movie at the first available opportunity at my local cinema, and thankfully there was actually people at this screening, because when I went to see Moonfall last week, there was no one at it. There was a lot of people at this screening. There was clearly a lot of interest in it. The interesting thing with this one is that there was so many jokes throughout the movie, so many, attempts at little jokes and the comedy that's within the video games to build the relationship between Nate and Sully in the movie. There wasn't one laugh in the movie theater I was in. And I think that says volumes, that there was just silence throughout the entire movie. There was definitely no laugh out loud moments, there was no oohs and ahs, there was no big reaction to anything within the movie. And I think that's very damning of the entire movie. In fact, about an hour into the movie, 4 or 5 people actually left the screening. The pacing within the first hour and a half of the movie is absolutely terrible. In places it's too fast, in other places it's too slow. But the weird thing is this movie's only about an hour and 48 minutes long. So I think that tells you everything. Now I'll try my best not to spoil too much of the story because people still want to watch the movie. If you've played the video games, you very much know a lot of the story because the movie very much nitpicks certain parts of the main Uncharted games and puts them into the movie. Instead of giving us a unique story with Nate and Sully, there's a little bit of that, but they very much just grab stuff from the video game and say, hey, let's recreate that, even though fans of the series have already experienced that in the video games. That was kind of a weird decision from the filmmakers. The other issue, which I mentioned when we looked at the trailer, was that Nate and Sully are both a lot younger than they are in the video game. Now that's not a big thing because you can just set the story a little bit earlier than the video games. However, when they nitpick stuff from the video games, it kind of muddies the water as to where does this fit within the timeline of Uncharted. It very much felt to me watching this movie as a fan of Uncharted that they were going, hey look, remember this thing from the video game? Hey look, remember Nate did this? Hey look, remember Nate did that? I can watch that on YouTube with someone just playing the games. Why they couldn't give us a more unique story for Nathan Drake and Sully, I don't know. I did also feel that the inclusion of Chloe, which Chloe's in the movie by the way, for anyone that didn't know, spoiler alert, she was in the second game, Uncharted 2, which as I mentioned is one of my favorite video games of all time. That's when she made her appearance in Uncharted and she became a fan favorite. She instantly in this movie, even though Elena's not in the movie, Chloe's in the movie, kind of weird. Now I've said before about video game movies, especially in that video called Dear Hollywood, where I tell Hollywood not to make movies based on video games. The big problem with making a movie on a video game is you will never be more interactive than the video game. Fans of the Uncharted series are fans of the series because they get to play through the game, solve the puzzles themselves. There's a fair level of difficulty to it. There's a challenge to it. And the players work through the story. You have to achieve it. You have to kill the bad guys. You have to solve the puzzles. You have to get the gold. Here in the movie, puzzles come along. They're solved in a montage or very, very quickly. The audience, of course, don't have any participation in the puzzle solving. And that takes away massively from your experience of Uncharted, and then the actors just go from point A to point B with very little struggle. And that's another thing within the movie, there's very little actual struggle for Nate and Sully, fairly easy all the way through. Now there is twists and turns of course, and people betraying each other, and that's fairly standard for an action movie, let alone an Uncharted movie. Overall, getting from point A to point B is far too easy. And once Nate cracks certain puzzles and certain codes and whatever it is that there has to be cracked, they just get to where they have to go. It's very choppy, the pace is all over the place. It's nowhere near as enjoyable as the video games, and it never ever will be. Even if they have to give us a unique story here, going along the path of recreating video game levels within a movie is idiotic, because they'll never be as good as playing through the video game yourself. It'll never be as immersive, it'll never feel as good on screen as it will in the video game. And that's why video game movies simply don't work. This movie very much feels like a cash grab movie where they go, hey, here's a popular series, we can exploit this, get some characters in there that people like, recreate stuff from the video games, everybody will be happy, everybody will flock to the cinemas. And I think people will flock to the cinemas for Uncharted and ultimately be left disappointed. Now, in saying that, there was one person in the movie theater I was in who started applauding at the end of the movie when she saw the prison scene, because it's basically the exact same as Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 is where Nate's brother appeared for the first time, but he appears in the movie pretty much right from the beginning, and then, you know, it's alluded to all the way through the movie that he's dead, but then of course we know well enough that he's not. They showed that in the movie and she was delighted with that and started applauding. But again, was the only person I saw have a big reaction to it. As I mentioned, people left during the screening after about an hour in. You could see a lot of people yawning and stretching and moving around, a lot of phones getting turned on, and a lot of interest dropping off, because there was just a lot of filler in it, a lot of trying to establish characters, even though most people already know who the characters are. Why everyone needs an origin story, I don't know. What I will say is the last 10-15 minutes, it definitely ramps up. The action builds. There's some great scenes with the boats being held by the helicopters, which we see in the trailer, of course, so that's not a spoiler. That scene is good, but I felt like I'd seen it all before. And that's the thing with this movie. A lot of the big stuff within the movie, even the big surprises, I'm like, oh yeah, didn't that happen in the video game? Haven't I seen this before? Maybe it's just because some of it's so generic, because that's basically what this movie is. It's a generic action / heist movie with Uncharted in the title. So in the end, after all was said and done, the credits rolled, the post-credit scene rolled, I was left very disappointed with the movie. Despite tapering my expectations, knowing it was a video game, I was left very disappointed with a very, very shit movie. There's no other way to put that. So when it comes down to a rating out of 10 for Uncharted, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It did have some good points. The Nolan North cameo was perhaps the highlight of the entire movie, which says a lot about the entire movie. So overall, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. So if you're hemming and hawing about whether to go see Uncharted in the movie theater, I'd say save your money and watch it on VOD when it comes out and just come back here and say, yeah, you're right, it was shit.